Thank you for questions, interventions, and all that. And I'll just address either questions or issues on which there might be nuances, and won't, of course, comment on those statements with which I'm in agreement. Well, first of all, I mean, again, the picture is more complicated than having one villain on the side of the opposition, which is ISIS, as it is called. I mean, actually, ISIS is not Al-Qaeda's, doesn't have the Al-Qaeda franchise. The Al-Qaeda franchise is with the Jabhat al-Nusra Front, which has been engaged even in some skirmishes or fightings with ISIS. Now, how would you characterize something like the Nusra Front? It's a front which is connected to Al-Qaeda and therefore to an extremely reactionary ideology. And it can't be regarded in any way as a progressive force. Now, it doesn't mean that in a clash between them and the regime, one should support the regime, as some people deduce from that. Basically, they are inserting themselves in a struggle that is, as a whole, a very progressive and just struggle, which has started in 2011, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Then you have also the Islamic Front, which is a collection of organizations of Salafi tendency or Muslim Brotherhood kind of tendency, and you have a split from that, which is called the Revolutionary Front. And here you can see different connections, different fundings. The Qataris funding the Islamic Front, the Saudis funding the split from them, and now the coalition. Basically, what's the difference between Qatar and the Saudis here is that Qatar, as I said from the start, tried to co-opt the uprising itself, and I mean, in terms of bringing to power its allies, whereas the Muslim Brotherhood, whereas the Saudi are actually very much in the same position of the United States, in the sense that they want stability. They fear very much destabilization of the region. And now their intervention in the Syrian conflict is actually converges with that of Washington in the sense of pushing for something, I mean, some kind of agreement that would keep the main structure of the regime, but will change figures and reduce put Sunnis instead of Alawis, to put it in very clear terms. Now, the left in Syria is not repeating the same mistake done by the Iranian left, as was mentioned. The Iranian left had illusions, spread illusions about the nature of the Khomeini leadership. The Syrian left, progressive, whatever you want to call them, I mean, I'm speaking here not of fringe groups, but of the major groups involved in these coalitions, councils, and the rest. They don't regard these, like Nusra, Islamic Front, and all that as progressive forces, and they're not having the same kind of illusions. But the point is that they are not confronting, they have not been confronting that from the problem, the initial problem of the Syrian revolution is the same that we find all over the Arab world, is the lack of strategy of progressive forces in imposing themselves as a third camp at equal distance from the Ancien regime and the counter-revolutionary forces of Islamic fundamentalism and the rest. And we can see this in Egypt, we can even see that in Tunisia, we can see this problem everywhere, and obviously that's also the case and very much so in Syria. So the councils, the local coordination councils, which were the real organizing force of the uprising in the early stage, well, they just, they accepted the formation of the National Council, where the Muslim Brotherhood were a main force backed by Turkey and Qatar, and abroad in exile, and that was the initial error already. Whereas what was required was to build an independent, progressive, democratic force of, leading, coordinating this Syrian revolution, and equally hostile to the whole regional order, whether represented by the Syrian regime or by the reactionary monarchies of the Gulf. Now, even with all that, the character of the revolution has not changed radically, as was put by someone. As was said, well, indeed there are, first of all, the boundaries are shifting, and many people now fighting in those Islamic denominations, whatever they are there because these are the people with the money, with the resources, with the organization, and here is the failure of the Syrian Free Army in this regard quite clearly, and the other forces are very messy. But the potential is still there, and the point is, what is the worst possible scenario in Syria? That would be the continuation of the regime, obviously. And any belief that this regime is a bulwark against Islamic extremism or whatever is, as I put it recently, it's like believing that alcoholism is a prophylactic against liver disease. This is completely absurd, because these are these regimes that actually produced or led to the proliferation of such reactionary forces. Now, it's indicated that I have to stop, so I stop here, and I apologize for not being able to take all the questions. There are other questions, but we can discuss them in the break if there is a break.